when we talk about conservation, it's often about big fluffy thing. But we do know that now the ecological crisis that we are going through doesn't really care if you're a big fluffy thing or a small inconspicuous creature. And so one of the concerns I have personally is that by focusing all our eggs into the same basket, mostly into large vertebrates in particular,
big charismatic creatures,
we are completely hiding the reality of what is going on for all the smaller invertebrates in particular. And I'm taking the example of a paper who estimated that 130,000 species might have gone extinct just over the few decades, while IUCN, in counterpart, actually estimate to 850 species to have gone extinct since the 16th century. So there's a big discrepancy. And so my question that I have for you is that how do you see that, how could we change this? I mean, clearly we need to protect those big fluffy things. They are important. But we also need to care for the smaller, maybe less charismatic creature.
I can answer you in two ways. The first way is, and it's it comes out like why chimpanzees, why orangutans, not little monkeys or what have you. So if you really care about conservation of your big charismatic species, the only way to conserve them is to conserve the environment.
Sorry.
If you conserve the environment, you're also conserving it for all these other less charismatic things. But I can answer you in another way too. We have an absolutely beautiful piece of film of roots and shoots around the world, and one of the scenes in it, there are all these little American kids, they're about 8 years old, and they've all got their placards, and they're all calling out, "Save our spiders, save our spiders, save our spiders." It's beautiful. And also, when I was at Gombe, my Hugo van Lauwijk, when I was taking all the film, he was also making an insect film. And so we had collected quite a lot of spiders and quite a lot of mantis. They all had names. I knew the difference between them. Some of them were really very, very special. So I could tell you stories about them. Little stories, again stories, like I said to you, stories. I saw something which nobody else has ever seen, and we never managed to film it because it poured with rain and my little place disappeared, was washed away. Do you know what I saw? You'll love this story, I think. You know the hunting wasps and how they they paralyze and lay their eggs, kind of nasty really. Well, this particular wasp I was way up in the hills at Gombe, and it was leading a cockroach by an antenna. Do you know a hunting wasp that takes cockroach? You do? Well, as the cockroach obviously didn't want to go, and I think was already semi-paralyzed, the antenna was getting shorter and shorter. But finally the wasp managed to get this poor little insect. I was so worried for the cockroach. Got it, and I don't know if it dug this hole, but it was here's the earth wall, and there was a little, like a cave, and maybe the wasp dug it.
Yes.
They do dig.
Did. Yes, they do.
Do you know what it did then? It got the cockroach in. It then got 2 little twigs and made bars. Now, I don't believe anybody else has ever seen that. I took Hugo to photograph it, and we got this rain, so it was all gone. I've looked ever since. I've told all my students. Nobody's ever seen it again, but I didn't make it up.
Some of this amazing behavior.
Yes,
Mass
and now,
foraging.
you know the most recent thing about bumblebees? Well, this came out 2 weeks ago. Somebody, I think it was Oxford, or maybe in Germany, I don't know, but somebody taught a bumblebee to pull a thread which drew up a little bubble of nectar so that it could reach it. But the amazing thing is that other bumblebees who weren't taught learned by simply watching that bumblebee. Now, these are the kind of stories you want to know how to get people more involved. Stories like this, I mean, wow, it's fascinating.
They are fascinating, but I don't find them connecting to conservation program, for example. And I think, I mean, in
Oh, but it
conservation...
does, because if you care about things, you want to
Oh, I do
conserve
care.
them.
But I think there is a distance, and I think that's a bit of the purpose of the program we try, is to understand that distance that people have and how they can actually reach to maybe a larger part of biodiversity overall and be maybe more inclined
Well, I
to
still go
protect
to my stories and how all these interconnections, these amazing, extraordinary interconnectedness of nature, and how one little species can disappear and you follow it through and you get ecosystem collapse, because that's the main food of this, and so this one collapses and then there's a beautiful example somewhere in the ocean. I can't remember what it was. I wrote about it.
I think you want us to add in, right? I mean, it's okay,
Yes,
but I think one of the things, because of Roots and Shoots, and I have young kids, and my son loves insects, and I'm convinced the reason he does is because I took him outside, and in Hong Kong particularly, I mean, there's not a lot to see. I mean, let's face it, when you go out into the woods anywhere in the world, you're not often going to see the large charismatic animals, I mean, except in Africa. But so what are the easiest things to see? Birds and insects. And I think if you get them young enough, you can get them very excited, especially if you know what you're taking them to see and you describe it in a way as they're seeing it as just this amazing thing. And they get excited, because at that age, they get excited.
Save our spiders.
By the time you get to university level, those things have already sort of been formed. And so it's a little bit harder to get university level students passionate about something anew. So I think, getting at them at a young age is how we're going to do that, because I couldn't agree with you more. I'm sure everyone in the room agrees with you, actually, about how important the insects and, large charismatic animals are fun to look at, but...
but we do save the environment, which saves the others.
That's
too.
right, yeah.
Just on that first point that you said, and so I don't want to take too much time from the question. The thing is, protecting an area doesn't necessarily ensure that you protect everything, because patterns of biodiversity, unfortunately, are very complex, and they do not necessarily correlate with one another for different taxonomic groups. And the second aspect, which I've seen in China in particular, where you go to those forests and it's silence, because there is nothing left. But then the value in terms of conservation that you provide to those forests, which for me as an entomologist still have incredible value, because I can find new species and incredible things. But for people who say, well, there is no more birds left, there is no more primates or no more large mammals, they just cut it because it lost it. And to me, that's a true loss, because we don't consider the value of conservation depending in the same way, depending on if that species is closest to us than it's further genetically to us. And that's sometimes my concern with that approach of, I find it a bit unilateral in a way.
We have to stop it getting to all these big ones going. We have to try and save it.
We have to try to save as much as
we
we can.
we all know how difficult this is.
Yes.
And you're perfectly right. Of course those forests have value.